let's do a little meditation to begin with, and we're going to meditate on the subject of emptiness, but also we'll discuss that and have a meditation near the end again after we've reviewed some of the points. So first of all, we're going to try to set our motivation, calm our mind. So sit comfortably. Relax your body and your mind. Place your attention, first of all, if you wish, on the breathing. And once you've begun to stabilize your concentration, bring your attention inward to your mental consciousness. You can actually scan through the sense consciousnesses and remind yourself, the eye consciousness, this is not what I'm going to be paying attention to. The ear consciousness, the olfactory, the nose consciousness, taste or tactile. But the mental consciousness within which we think, within which we grasp to the eye. Try to focus on its nature of clear light. Within which all the thoughts arise, like a clear space within which the white and black cloud-like mental factors arise. Whatever thoughts come, recognizing them, let them go, defocus on them, so to speak, and refocus on the nature of the mind within which they arose. Like being in front of an aquarium and letting go of your fascination with the fish, the seaweed, the sand, and so forth, to focus on the otherwise transparent water within which they're all abiding. within this relatively calm, clear state of mind, try to instigate the appearance of the ego, the sense of I. You might ask yourself, who am I? Or recall some dynamic situation where you've been abused, or when you feel very strong attachment towards something. Now, with this quiet mind, analyze one part of your mind without disturbing the ignorance that's grasping to that sense of I. One part of your mind, very subtly just watching and analyzing how the I seems to be appearing. Does it seem to be something real, true? And in a sense, existing from its own side, not just something which is named, merely named. Although when you first begin to look, you may be looking at the grosser manifestations of a sense of I that seem to be identical with, mixed with the body, or perhaps some mental state. When you look longer, let these other states subside, the innate sense, the innate appearance of the I is one that seems to be existing from its own side. Now turn your attention to the way in which your consciousness, in this case the factor of ignorance or self-grasping, how that's reacting to the appearance of the I. Does it seem that your mind is accepting, assenting to that, grasping to that as true as it is? Remind yourself of Aryadeva's quotation that even doubting, thinking maybe this doesn't exist, not having certainty, but even doubting in that way, maybe this sense of I that seems to be truly existent, maybe the object that I'm conceiving of doesn't exist at all, such a truly existent I. How would that be? What would the what would the repercussions of that be? What would the result be? All of our relationships would be different. Our response to criticism, we would evaluate what took place around us on the basis of different dharma criteria rather than how it affects my ego. Recalling, as we'll review this session, the 4-point analysis. First of all, the first point was recognizing that which is to be negated, the object of negation. In this case, that sense of an I, the I itself that seems to be existing from its own side, and the grasping to it. Both of those are to be eliminated. And then recalling the second point is to make yourself certain, to bring some ascertainment that if such an I, truly existent I, existing from its own side, if it were to be like that, if it were to exist, it would have to be a truly existent entity that's one with the aggregates, truly one with the body and mind, 5 aggregates, or truly, utterly different than the body and mind. As we recall, if any two things exist, if they exist, they have to either be identical or different. So if the I and the aggregates exist, they either have to be one or different. Here we're not talking simply about the conventional I, but the sense of a truly existent I. It would have to be truly one with the aggregates. And as there are many aggregates, there would either have to be many I's, or because there's one I, there would have to be one aggregate. If they were truly different than the aggregates, utterly different than the aggregates, whatever happened to the aggregates would not be recognized as happening to me. And going back, remembering the pervasion, so to speak. If the I, truly existent I, existed as it appears, it would have to be truly one with the aggregates or truly different than the aggregates. This thing that you're focusing on. As it's not truly one with the aggregates, because of the faults I just mentioned, and many others, and it's not truly different than the aggregates, since the aggregates do exist, a truly existent I does not exist. slowly over time, as you get familiar with this, the sense of the I can begin to fade and disappear, and what's left in its wake is merely a vacuity, an emptiness, the mere lack of what was previously appearing and previously grasped to exist. Although there's no thought process now thinking, oh, this is emptiness. There's merely the mind concentrated on that vacuity as it's been induced by this analysis. There is an implicit understanding of the meaning of emptiness. Relax and bring your attention back to the present. So any questions? Any observations? How was your meditation? Venerable, how was your meditation? Means, what does that mean?
Wasn't much meditation.
Oh, okay. I'm sure there was. Maybe that was good. There was no I. The realization of emptiness. Anyone have any observation? How about you? This lady back there, yeah. How was your meditation? Yeah.
I actually came in late.
Oh, okay. No, it's all right.
She was meditating.
Who's that? Yes. How was your meditation?
I could barely understand what you were saying. But,
Oh my gosh.
But
Do you speak English or was I speaking?
barely. But I felt that the sense of self was the service with the human beings around me.
Say that again. The sense of self was what?
The service that I am to the other, my friends, to the beings living.
So what we're talking about here is something very, very specific. It's not a sort of a general first checking what does the I mean. Here, I think you haven't been to the other talks, have you? No. Okay. So what we're talking about here is a particular kind of way that the self appears to our mind, like when someone criticizes you, points you out, or you feel upset about something, when you're really angry or you're really happy. There is a sense of I within the mind. Not when I say within the mind, I don't mean the sense of I is looking at the mind and saying that's me, but there's just a sense saying, almost as though there's an observer backside, which we understand to be the I, that we grasp at, and we accept that as being the I. The Buddha said that was the root of all of our problems. I think very, very different than most spiritual systems in the world. The Buddha talked about selflessness, not in the sense of when we use it in a general way, the world selfless giving or selfless service, but a sense of a recognition, a wisdom in our own mind that is an antidote to the usual way of responding to this appearance of the I. Usually what we do is we accept it. The same way that some people in the desert accept a mirage, or that you might accept a reflection in the mirror, possibly if things are arranged in a certain way in a room. You might walk into a room and see a reflection in a mirror and start talking to someone who's actually sitting over here, thinking that you're talking to the person. I don't know if you could imagine that. Actually, that appearance in the mirror is empty of the person. There's no person really there. There's something appearing. When the Buddha said that the self didn't exist the way that it appears to our mind, he didn't say that there is no self whatsoever. Remember, there is a conventionally existent self. So, for instance, when we're talking about the 4-point analysis, do you remember the 4-point analysis, what we talked about in the last class with Rinpoche? When we say, if two things exist, this is a very general thing. It doesn't have to be only in the case of emptiness. If two things exist, say the book and the watch. Did I point in the right direction? This is the book. As I said, this is the watch and this is the book. This is the book, this is the watch. If two things exist, they either have to be the same, they either have to be identical or different. In general, whether you talk about true existence or not. So the book is different than the watch. How about the book and the book? The book and the book are identical, right? Just one thing. We could give different names, say for libro and book. If someone said, give me the libro, and you said, although you know Spanish, you say, oh, I'm sorry, there's no libro, there's only a book here. You would recognize that libro and book are identical in their entity. They're different names, but they're referring to the same entity, right? Here, when we talk about self and aggregates, these are the two things that we're checking. Because there is a sense of the components of our experience, our body and mind, in the context of the question of this young lady. Service to others is performed by our body in conjunction with motivation by our mind and our wisdom, good heart and so forth. So somehow, without our body and mind, you can't really refer to ourself. Those are the components of the person. The Buddha said the person is really dependent upon, the conventionally existent person is dependent upon the aggregates, the 5 aggregates. So let's check first of all, how about let's say here are the 5 aggregates. The book represents the 5 aggregates now. And here's the conventionally existent person that does exist. How does the conventionally existent person exist? Do you know, Diana?
It's merely labeled by the mind of dependence on the 5 aggregates?
Right. It's in a sense, it's not like some findable entity outside, but it's merely a name or a concept that we attribute to the combination of the aggregates that we call the person. Okay? Is that the same or different than the aggregates? Can we apply the same analysis there that we do when we talk about the truly existent self? Remember when we said the truly existent self is not truly one with the aggregates? It's not truly different than the aggregates. Therefore, it doesn't exist. Does that also apply to the conventionally existent self? Is that not existent? Well, here, when we talk about the conventional self, it's not appearing to be truly existent. It's just conventionally existent. So conventionally, is it the same as the aggregates or different than the aggregates? The conventionally existent self. What do you think, Frank? Mark?
Same.
Mark says same? Oh, Frank said same. Oh, someone else said same. What's your name?
Mark.
Mark. Oh, you're also Mark. I thought you were Vin Diesel. You look like Vin Diesel, movie star. You say it's the self and the aggregates are the same? Does anyone agree with Mark?
Sure. Sure.
Okay, you agree with Mark.
Sure, because suppose someone says they're going to come here, Venerable George.
Uh-huh.
So we say, okay, Peter's going to come here, Venerable George. And then on the way there, Peter, unfortunately, there's an automobile accident, he dies, he's gone. Well, then nobody shows up at the teaching. So the person who was going to be here at the teaching, Peter, and the aggregates must be identical.
Did you understand that? You understand that? Yeah.
Because if you eliminate the aggregates, you eliminate the person.
Exactly. So it must
So
be
does
the
that
same.
mean they're identical or that they're related, that there's a relationship?
They're identical because Peter's brother is related to Peter's brother.
Pretty soon you're going to be telling me that you are your own grandpa. Right? I figured that out, by the way. I looked on the web last night. If you have a daughter, it doesn't have to be your stepdaughter. If you have a daughter and your father marries her, the consequences are that you will be your own grandpa. The famous Willie Nelson song, I am my own grandpa. Anyway, just so there's a lot of verses of the song, but if you get down to if you analyze it, that's the thing. So I don't think that's right what you were saying. Not about being your own grandpa, but about the self and the aggregates being identical. Actually, the conventional self and the aggregates are conventionally different. The aggregates, the self is something which is designated to the aggregates. It is dependent upon the aggregates, but it is not the same as the aggregates. If it was identical to the aggregates, you'd run into some of the same kind of problems. You wouldn't have to have truly, you wouldn't have to say the word truly, but you'd still have to have many eyes, many selves, because there are many aggregates. But there's just one self. The aggregates have many parts. So actually the conventionally existent self is an entity, an impermanent entity, because it's designated to the aggregates, and it changes just as the aggregates change. It's dependent upon it. So when the aggregates experience suffering, because one of the aggregates is the feeling aggregate, right? The self is said to experience suffering, but the self is not the feeling aggregate. The self is just imputed. The imputedly existent, the designatedly existent self is said to suffer or to feel happiness and so forth. So last time we were getting into the sort of the subtle points of emptiness. Now this is, for those of you who've not heard about emptiness before, this is maybe one of the first presentations of logical reasoning refuting true existence or inherent existence. This is what's being refuted. It's not refuting existence in general. The Buddha said things do exist conventionally, but what they lack is a certain mode of existing in which they appear to be findable, existing from their own side, say this mug. There is a conventionally existent mug, which is the concept that I attribute to this collection of parts. But that, as we said before, even that conventionally existent mug is not identical with the parts. It's something which is conventionally different than the parts. Does that make some sense? Mm-hmm. So when we start to study emptiness, oftentimes we're not introduced to logical reasoning because at first, before you actually recognize the object of negation, remember that was the first essential point, the 4 essential points, to recognize the object of negation and investigate how it seems to be appearing. If at first you spend a lot of time analyzing, you're not going to really make any headway you can actually come up with some wrong understandings. So it's now that we're first getting some of the first kinds of reasonings that can refute this true existence. So this is one particular reasoning. This is not the only reasoning that's used. There are other reasonings that can be used to refute or to negate this apparent true existence that's appearing to our mind. For instance, there's a reasoning called the king of reasonings. Roberto, do you know what that is, the king of reasonings? The king of reasonings is what's called the reasoning of dependent arising. That Roberto is not truly existent, the person, Roberto is not truly existent, because Roberto is a dependent arising. It means he, in the subtle sense, it means he arises or exists in dependence upon a basis of designation, the five aggregates, a consciousness perceiving those, and that consciousness giving a concept, designating a concept or name, Roberto, to those aggregates. That's the only way. You can't find Roberto anywhere else. In a sense, like Buddha said, well, he didn't say Roberto in the sutras, but in a sense he could say, Roberto is just a name. Actually, he said, for instance, Bodhisattva is just a name. He might have said, I don't know, maybe you were there. Maybe he said, Roberto is just a name. It doesn't mean that Roberto is the sound Roberto, the reverberation traveling through space. That's obviously not Roberto, because Roberto has different attributes than sound, right? But you can't find, it's almost, it's beyond our ordinary way of thinking when you begin to think about the ramifications of emptiness. Roberto, the sense of Roberto that we have is something really findable, associated with his aggregates perhaps, but perhaps we don't have a very fine idea what that means. But if we were to say Roberto is no more than a name, a concept attributed to those aggregates, you can't find Roberto anywhere. It only arises when there are the aggregates, a consciousness perceiving them, and the thought Roberto, the name Roberto being given. Did you have a question about that? Yeah.
Yes, it's sounding in this discussion of the aggregates that there's some confusion between the physical organs with which we associate the internal experience.
Confusion of the physical organs.
They're sort of being lumped together.
Which organs are you talking about? The kidney, the liver?
The eyes, the ears, the nose, the physical being.
Yeah, all of those.
And the objects of mind or consciousness which we attribute to.
So when we talk about the five, five aggregates, we're talking about the body as one. All of the material of the body, whatever it be, the gross and subtle material, the organs, the skin, the blood, the bones, all of the material of your body are called the form aggregate. Then there's another aggregate, the feelings, all of the mental phenomena that respond to either, that experience either pleasure or suffering or sort of a neutral feeling. There's a factor of discrimination, our ability to discriminate, both intellectually and just in terms of our sense consciousness having the ability to see different things. Within the visual field, you can discriminate one thing from another. It's not just one homogeneous field that you see with your eyes. If you didn't have discrimination, there would be no discrimination. Everything would be the same. And then there are all the other mental factors we call compositional factors, all the anger and attachment and love and kindness and good work. And consciousness itself, bare consciousness, what we call primary consciousness. Those are called the five aggregates. So those are the building blocks of the person. If you take those away, one at a time, there's nothing left of the person. There's nothing. And so one erroneous conclusion of that might be that, well, somehow the I abided in those somewhere. So when you took them away, Like say for instance, you took all the furniture out of the house, in one of the pieces of furniture there was, your $100,000, savings account. So once you took out all the furniture, the $100,000 was gone, right? It's not like that. It's not like when you take out all the aggregates. In one of the aggregates was the I. You take away the aggregates and you can't find the I anywhere. There's nothing to impute the I onto any longer. So this reasoning that we're talking about now is one that is called the reasoning of being one or different. This is used in a lot of different places, especially with the sense of I. It can be used in other contexts too, talking about other phenomena also. But if something were truly existent, whether it be the self or the chariot or the whatever, it would have to be truly one with its parts, the basis of designating that phenomena, or it would have to be truly different than those. So this kind of introduction to logic, I think, is very, very good, because many of the reasonings of emptiness have a similar kind of way of approach. If something were, finding the consequences, if something were truly existent, what would be the consequences? If something were truly existent. And then eliminating those various possibilities. Well, if it were truly existent, it would have to be this, 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 or this, or this. It's not this, 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 or this. Therefore, it doesn't exist. So what one has to do, first of all, is go through these stages, as Rinpoche has been talking. First of all, spend some time in recognizing how the self seems to be appearing as truly existent one, as a truly existent entity, something existing from its own side, not just imputed. When you look at the sense of I in your own mind, during the day, if you get angry, if you get flustered, if there are arguments around you and the ego is rising, use that as an opportunity to meditate. You've got the opportunity now. The I is rising very strongly. So if you maybe this would be interesting. If you get in a car accident or if the police stop you, you can just say, "Hold on a minute." They might not know what you're doing, but this is the principle behind what the Tibetans practiced, the practice of Chu. You know what Chu means? Means cutting or slaying of the ego. Because what it means is that this sense of ego that we're believing in has to eventually be eliminated, refuted, or slayed, cut. Chu in Tibetan means to cut or to slay. So there were these meditators in Tibet. Maybe Lama Zopa, you've seen Lama Zopa Rinpoche playing the very large damaru and blowing the thigh-bone trumpet and practicing Chu. There are many chupas in Tibet that used to go around. They would go to the charnel grounds at night, like a cemetery, in order to be in that kind of, I'm going to say creepy, is that a good modern word? Creepy kind of situation where the ego is very, very prominent. Fear arises very strongly. Using that situation then, because the object of negation is so clear, if you've already meditated on emptiness, now you get a very clear idea of that sense of I, and you can let go of it, and even go to the other extreme. Give your body and mind to the spirits that might be there, and so forth. So the different parts of Chu. Okay, so that we don't go over, and so that you'll have a chance to prepare for Rinpoche's class, let's do another short meditation and dedication. Try to compose yourself and recall the clear light nature of your mind. And again, instigate the sense of I if necessary. How does the I seem to be appearing to you, the sense of your own self? Sort of as an observer, the controller of your body and mind. That's on one level. But even how does that seem to be appearing? That observer. Its mode of existence seems to be one that's real. It is existing, it seems to be existing the way that it appears. It's true. Not just a name. I. It seems to be something solid and concrete in your heart. Something that is tangibly hurt when you're offended. If this I that's appearing were to exist that way, see if you can recall the necessary consequence of that, that it would have to be truly one with the aggregates, as the aggregates are the basis for designating the person, or it would have to be different, truly different than the aggregates. Just like the book and the watch either have to be the same or different. Now we might be tempted to say the I is, this sense of I is identical to the aggregates. But there are many consequences of that, absurd consequences, some of which Rinpoche went over last time. Just in brief, we'd say that if it were identical with the aggregates, as there are many aggregates, as there are 5 aggregates, there would have to be 5 selves. But we only sense one self. We have a sense of one I. Or as there's one I, there would have to be just one aggregate. But there are many aggregates. There are 5 at least. You could also use the other consequences, that if the I, the truly existent I, were identical, or if an truly existent I, a truly existent I, were identical with the aggregates, if the body, if it were truly existent, with existently one with the body, if the body were destroyed, the I would be destroyed, so forth. But even if the basis of designation, temporary basis of designation, like the body and gross mind, decay or destroyed, the I can be imputed onto another secondary basis, like the continuity of the mind in the intermediate state, or onto a new body and gross mind in the next life. So the I is not destroyed. Also, the I is not truly different than the aggregates. If it were, there'd be no relationship with the aggregates at all, because it's truly, inherently different. So see if you can let go of this apprehension of the I, believing in it as true, as appears. with the dawning of the wisdom that realizes emptiness, growing from small, the ignorance grasping to the I begins to decrease. Just perceive a vacuity in place of that I. The I does not exist whatsoever the way that it appears to my mind. Great relief. And within that sense of emptiness, dedicate the merits that we've created, conventionally existent, but not findable, the same way that the I is not findable, but still exists conventionally. Due to these merits, may I quickly realize the wisdom realizing emptiness, accomplish that, and the precious mind of conventional bodhicitta, wishing to serve and work for all sentient beings. May I quickly become a Buddha for the sake of all living beings.